I cannot believe it's taken me so long to get back to you guys. In the meantime, we've even reached the 5,000 subscriber mark. Now, I know that's only a small step for YouTube, but a giant leap for this channel. Now I'm back strong, as I spoke with Chris Vogler last year, the author of The Writer's Journey, one of my 2 favorite books on screenwriting. Chris answers some questions that have been on my mind for over 20 years since I first read his book. So what you're going to see is sort of a fanboy interview, and I had to cut some of my fanboy questions short, as you will see. Now, sorry also about the picture quality. It's not ideal. We did it over Zoom and my settings were not high definition. Anyway, I'll hope that you'll enjoy the content. If you've read the book, it will certainly be a great addition. Now, if you haven't, do yourself a favor and read it now before watching the interview. Be warned though, it's not Save the Cat style, easily digestible fare, but it's essential. The link is in the notes below. So what did we talk about? Well, why exactly 12 journey stages? How does Vogler look at sequences? How to use the journey as an active development method when you're writing screenplays? Vogler also talks about directors Anthony Mann and Mad Max creator George Miller, and he also mentions Darren Aronofsky, but the last one will go in the uncut 1-hour version of this interview for the diehards among you who want to be member of the premium channel. More about that later, hopefully. We'll also talk about Robert McKee's criticism of Joseph Campbell and about meeting the great man himself. Not Robert McKee, Joseph Campbell. But first, I live in Australia. In his book, Vogler says that in the whole world, there are only 2 cultures where the hero's journey doesn't fully apply: Germany and Australia. Now, I didn't really buy the Australia part of that. People here love watching hero's journey movies just as much as anywhere else in the West. So my guess was that this statement was not the result of research, but rather a typical political distortion whispered into Chris Vogler's ears by the same people who meddle with the forces of nature and impose their own agendas on which films get made and which don't. And lo and behold, it seems that I was right about that one.
It was presented to me that that word hero was a bit culturally tainted and had some uncomfortable associations. And this is in the filmmakers and writers that I was talking to, who were trying to clue me into the intonations of the story idea as it moves from culture to culture. In Australia, that was presented to me in the language of this tall poppy syndrome. A hero is an exceptional person. A hero is one out of the crowd who stands out and who takes on a responsibility, maybe unwillingly, but they take on some responsibility to change things and are transformed themselves by that, and that they're kind of outstanding people. And that, in this tall poppy syndrome idea, was kind of a dangerous thing.
There was a different sort of political approach to filmmaking in Australia, and even the commissioners here in Australia now make very clear expressions of interest towards hero-driven, or at least character arc-driven stories. SBS released a pamphlet where they're looking for big characters and big change. That is the hero's journey, as we've learned it, right?
Well, yes, I do make that association or that assumption. It's really hard to escape these forms because they're so fundamental. It's like the color wheel or something, or the notes of the scale. It's very difficult to compose a painting or a piece of music that doesn't use those elements. So when I encountered the hero's journey idea, I thought, wonderful, this is it. That's what I was looking for. And I immediately, in film school, rebelled against it, as many artists do, to say, that can't be it. What about me? What about the artist in me? So I made an antithetical anti-hero's journey film, which was a completely to me, abstract composition about samurais, and I had all kinds of crazy shots and things out of sequence and no plan or narrative. But the joke was, I presented it to the objective observers, my classmates, and they all said, "Oh, it was fascinating the way you suggested the hero's motivation, and you gave him this interesting backstory. When he turned and looked over his shoulder, we knew he was thinking about his wife and his son." And, none of that was there from me, but that's what people saw.
When people talk about the hero's journey, it's always 12 stages, which means they've read your book, because your book's the one that boiled it down into 12 stages. Now, what I'm interested in, when you decided to settle for these 12, what didn't make the cut?
I think the difference is he was giving you what we would call a drop-down menu of possibilities. And the pieces that I left out to address that are the things Campbell talks about in this drop-down menu. Like he'll come to a turning point or to a particular stage, and then that will drop down and expand into 3 or 4 possibilities, like in the belly of the whale, or on the night sea journey, or he uses different terms for the middle of the story in these poetic terms about mystical things that don't always translate very well into the screen and actors doing things on a stage. It was a simplified Swiss Army knife that I was trying to create. Campbell's was the full package that you could use to do anything. It's got a screwdriver and a nail gun and every kind of, it's got tape in it and everything you could possibly want to use. And I said, okay, let's try to get an essential toolkit. Campbell was walking in the woods and he saw this gigantic beast, and he maybe saw the head and the tail and a couple of the feet or something, and he drew his picture of it. I came along and I saw what he had sketched, and then I saw my own little head and knuckle and various other little pieces of it, and I threw that out. But I don't want anybody to accept it cold and just eat it up and say, okay, now I've got it and I can stop thinking.
Recently, when Scott Myers published his book, he was also giving you a nod, The Protagonist's Journey. If ever I write a book, it would be The Sequence Journey. Are you familiar with the sequence approach?
No, not specifically, but it excites me. The idea of it excites me. A film director named Anthony Mann, who was known, he directed El Cid and some big epic, did mostly Westerns, very, very interesting, dark Westerns that were almost like film noir. But he said in some interview that he had a very simple structural pattern of sequences, which he called ADOR. And it was action, decision, ordeal, and reward, and then go back. So we have to start over again. So you go back, action, decision, ordeal, reward. And I think that's brilliant, and it works. And in practice, dealing with thousands of scripts for the studio and hundreds of scripts that actually got made, you kind of peeled off, okay, forget about the opening now. We're in this section, and let's just make this section sing its best and get the most out of that.
I was interested to hear very specifically how you turned it from an observation, a descriptive model, into, somewhat prescriptive, because that's how studios work with writers. Studios say, we want that, we want that. So how do you make that transition?
Mostly by asking questions. Along the lines of what if? Well, just take a look at this for a second, this section. And what if the aim of this section was not just to get him out of jail, but also to build a relationship that later would help him get out of jail and would continue thereafter? So the aim of the thing, the aim of the sequence, the particular emotional movement and the sort of ideation that you're trying to allow the audience to have by what they see, how they react to that and kind of conclude things for themselves, trying to maximize that. George Miller said to me, we had gone to see Campbell speak, and he couldn't speak that day, but I had a little talk with George Miller at the door of the place. He said, I use the hero's journey. I'm conscious of it. I try to put it out of my mind after becoming aware of it. And I certainly don't use it to tell Mel Gibson how to drive the truck.
And I just want to ask, have you ever met Campbell in person?
Yes, I did a few times. The first couple of times were just at speeches he gave, and I'd come up with a book for him to sign and say a few words. But there was that time I meant to go with George Miller and a bunch of other people to spend the whole weekend with him, and that would have been my dream. He was going to give a weekend workshop, but he was taken ill, and so he didn't show up. But the last time he was out in public, I had written to him and told him what I was doing for Hollywood, that I had sort of taken his ideas and translated it. And I said in the letter, I hope that's okay with you. And I didn't ask anything of him. And as he was leaving the hall, they were screening a film about him, a documentary about him. And as he was leaving the hall, he was just mobbed by people. And I wanted to say something to him, but his wife was there alongside him, a wonderful woman named Jean Erdman. And she saw me and she read the situation. And she said, she motioned me over and was going to grab his sleeve and get his attention. And I said, with my hand, I waved it off. I said, no, it's okay. I see, I was making motions like, I see he's really overwhelmed, so it's fine. And she said, no, come here, and pulled him over and whispered something to him, I think must have been along the lines of, this young man's doing the Hollywood thing with your hero's journey. And he sort of erected himself to full height. He's a big, tall man. And he got like, he was at his full vigor again. And he pumped my hand and he said, young man, you go with this stuff. This will take you a long way. And then was taken out of the theater. So I got my little blessing. And I'm very grateful for that he connected somehow. He knew through his wife that I was carrying on his work in this field, and doing that, I hope he knew respectfully.
And you followed your bliss in that way.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't have much choice about that. It seemed to present itself. I think that, it's one of the elements of the hero's journey that the hero often is chosen or feels chosen. They feel like there's some kind of spotlight shining on me, and I look around and there's nobody else to take the responsibility. So I guess it's me. It was in the air at that time. Because Campbell's work had been out for a while, since 1949. This was about 1976. And it was out there, but nobody had articulated it or translated it into the language of movies, because Campbell wasn't thinking about movies at all. He doesn't refer to them at all. He famously said that he didn't see any movies between Charlie Chaplin and 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Recently, I think it was Robert McKee, I saw him uttering some criticism about the lack of scholarly approach by Joseph Campbell. He said that he had not come to his conclusions in a scientific way. What's your response to that? Because by my knowledge, the book has been highly respected ever since it was published in, I think, 49. What criticism is there about Campbell's approach? Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am. That's always been one of the guns that gets aimed at him and at the hero's journey idea. You certainly could point that gun at me, because I'm no scholar. He didn't go down the academic path, and he was ostracized because of that. And he fit into a certain category, and I think that my work does too, of the popularizer. Somebody who says, okay, there's these wonderful academics over here, and it's too much trouble for you people to go into it. It's too complicated. So let me make it a little bit simpler for you. Now, Campbell isn't simple by any means, although he did reduce these very complex things to a little tune that you could sing and remember almost. And he was criticized for that.
Is Robert McKee a scholar?
I don't know. He's a very good actor and a very good presenter.
It's a question that was asked to Joseph Campbell by Bill Moyers. It's in the book, The Power of Myth. And I was reading that book in 2009, I think it was. And the question was, what myths do people live by today? Where do you think we're going? Where are our myths evolving towards?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I think the dominance of the superhero genre tells you some things about this, that they're, when something comes into the culture like that, it's a mirror of people's thinking. It's an expression of the collective consciousness or unconscious, whatever you want to call it. And it seems right now that the wish, and that's the other thing, is that all stories are in some way wishes, that the world could be this way, or that people would understand or see my point of view. So the wish is to transcend the human limitations. We have superheroes, but they're deeply, deeply flawed, just like we are. Where the bad guys often are the more interesting and attractive side of the superhero film sometimes. So it is a pendulum, and the pendulum sometimes swings back, as I think it has with that Barbie moment that we're experiencing right now, of just something goofy and silly. And I think the other side of it is Oppenheimer, where we are studying the exceptional geniuses, the technological heroes, if you will, who sometimes can lead us into very dark and dangerous places. Films about Steve Jobs, for example, or Zuckerberg, or the different technological giants. We want to know about them because they are clearly leading us somewhere. We may not be ready for that. So
we're going full circle to our first conversation when we're talking about Michael Vesey, and the concept for your book initially was going to be partially for screenwriters and partially for self-development. What were the conversations about back then in terms of getting that balance right? A manual for writers, or a guide for life?
Here's the thing. I didn't have to work very hard on that self-help aspect of it. It was self-evident from the beginning. People got it. I would say when I gave my presentations, I want you to do sort of parallel processing. Think about your movie or some movie you saw, but also think about your own life and observe, do these things I'll talk about match up to your own thing? And you could just see it in the audience that people are going, oh yeah. I had a threshold guardian, and I had an ordeal, and I had a near escape with death, and so forth. And I experienced that myself in my own life applications of this stuff. When I first lectured about the hero's journey, there was opposition. A guy wrote an article for the newspaper attacking me, Joseph Campbell, the movie Willow, which had just come out. Ron Howard directed this sword and sorcery fantasy. I didn't know how to deal with this guy until one of my friends said, think, which archetype is he? And I went down the list and came to, oh, he's the threshold guardian. Of course. Well, how do you deal with threshold guardians? Once he was named, I had then a drop-down menu of things to do. You can attack them directly, but that usually doesn't get you anywhere. It's better if you seduce them, if you bring them onto the team somehow, if you get them turned around so they are pulling with you. And that's exactly what I did. Instead of trying to get the guy fired or challenging him to a duel, I invited him to a workshop. And he came, and we had a wonderful debate. It was, quite fiery, but it made a very entertaining afternoon for people. So I made what my boss at Fox used to say, I made lunch out of it, and it was that those two words, threshold guardian, gave me control over something that was scary and out of my control. And I think that's how this pattern works for people. Maybe it's an illusion, but it does give you some feeling that I know what's coming next, and I know what that was that just happened, and I know what, some options. And I think it's useful for that.
Chris, thank you so much. It's been an amazing 2 hours conversing with you. Another light shed on the writer's journey. Those viewers who haven't yet bought the book, you don't have to click very far. You'll find it. Just Google The Writer's Journey, Chris Vogler, and you'll find some ways to legally obtain it, please. And why not also purchase the companion piece by Stuart Wojtyla, also from Michael Veazey Productions, to dive even more deeply. Chris Vogler, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful to Stuart Wojtyla because he did that work and I didn't have to. So he did a great job. So thank you very much, Karel. Great talking with you.
Now, reading the book, The Writer's Journey, is only one click away. Check the notes below the video here on the YouTube channel. Now, let me know in the comments if you're interested in watching the whole hour with Vogler. I'm looking into creating a premium version of the channel so I can afford to publish a little more often. Meanwhile, if you want to support the channel and me, the best thing is to educate yourself by taking the Immersion Screenwriting course. Links are below. If there are any specific screenwriting topics that you'd like to see covered here, just post a comment below or send an email via the Story Department website. That's thestorydepartment.com. Also playing with the idea of doing a weekly live stream. Let me know if you're up for that. In any case, I'm really grateful for the wonderful feedback that I've received from all of you over the past weeks and months. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, do it now. Find the button and click away. Then also make sure you hit the bell button to be notified of new posts. I'm truly encouraged to create more videos for you all. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Cheers.